Okay. Is this better? Hopefully people can hear me now. My apologies for that. So as I was saying, some of you are just typing into the chat now, which is excellent. Let's see, is it better now? Of course, I don't have let's see. Oh, great. Good. Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you folks for typing in. I see Chris is here and Jacqueline, Gretchen, Cynthia. So excellent. Sorry about that. I must have had the microphone off. So I apologize for that. Basically, I was thanking everyone for joining me these last 11 months or so. And we've really just opened the door to various topics around death and dying and end of life. So thank you for your participation and my wonderful guests throughout the year. Looking forward again to being able to have a new slate for January 2016. So be looking forward to that. But tonight you're in for a webinar with just me. As I was saying when people couldn't hear me was that I'm flying solo tonight, talking about advanced care planning. And also I'll be sharing some slides. So you won't be looking at a talking head for the whole time. So I love that you guys are already typing into the chat. So let us know, let me know, it's just me tonight. Let me know where you're listening in from. And please feel free to put in any questions and comments. That would be really helpful. So tonight we're talking about advanced care planning. Let me just make sure that I didn't miss anything on my notes. Yes, we're good. So advanced care planning. The title of this is You Only Die Once, So Plan It Well. The importance of advanced care planning. And this is something, in addition to many topics around end of life and death and dying, that it's very, very much a passion of mine. It's to really help people to see that we have the power. My website is called Powerful You, and it's for intentional reason that we have the power to really say what it is that we want at the end of our life. And so planning ahead for that, that last chapter, as I like to say, is it is within our realm to be able to do. I like to say we plan for weddings, we plan for births, we plan for parties. The end of our life, I know it's an area where a lot of people don't like to talk about. However, it's a part of the continuum. So if we plan for those other things, what about planning for this? So I think that tonight we'll talk a little bit about what I call the 3 Ps. That's P as in Peter, around advanced care planning, and talking about the importance of it, some reasons why we don't, and then the opportunities that we have to move ahead. And at the end, I'll be offering ways if people are interested to continue to kind of dive deep into this. There'll be an opportunity for you to be able to do that. So stick around to the end and I'll be able to share that with you. So let me get started now and flip to the screen. So I have some slides. Let me do a little bit of a screen share here. And hopefully people will tell me if they can see those slides. Hopefully you can see it. Okay. So the first slide is, as I mentioned, you only die once, so plan it well. So I'm just curious, as you're typing into the chat, thank you so much. Curious to know what brought you here tonight. Is there something specific around advanced care planning? Is there something, specific questions that you might have? Is there a reason that, maybe you've done advanced care planning and want to hear more? Maybe you haven't and you want to figure out how to get started. So just type in, what brought you here tonight in terms of what you hope to get out of it. Okay. So who am I? So I'm Kim Adams, which I neglected to mention at the beginning of the webinar as I introduced this last webinar on Vital Conversation, Dialogues on Living and Dying Well. And I'm a certified professional life coach with an end-of-life specialty. I'm also a hospice volunteer and just very active in the community, the end-of-life community. What brought me to some of this work is, especially around end-of-life advanced care planning, is back in 1994, my mother-in-law passed away. Actually, my mother-in-law died. Starting to really pay attention to language. And so just being clear about that. So 1994, my mother-in-law died. And if we back up just a little bit before that, in 1991, my father-in-law died. Relatively sudden, but he did have a little bit of some physical ailments. But he died young. He was only 53, 54. And so after he died, we really attempted to have some conversations with my mother-in-law about what it is that she was interested in terms of planning and the end of her life. At the time, she was only 56 when he passed, but just beginning to have those conversations. She had a strong family in North Carolina that she was extremely close with, even though she lived in New York City. So it was our attempts and our conversation with her around what was important to her and what did she want for the end of her life were always met with, do whatever you want, put me wherever you want. Now, as I just mentioned, she had extended family in North Carolina, and she was very close with. So with a statement like that, of put me wherever you want, to me that left the door open a little bit that maybe she was uncertain where she wanted to go, or maybe she did really maybe want to go down there, even though her husband was buried in New York City. So fast forward now to 1994, and at the age of 58, she dies suddenly in her sleep of a heart attack. So not only are we now dealing with a sudden loss, but we're also dealing with that question of where shall we bury her? Because she said to us, do whatever you want, put me wherever you want. And so, was that something that in terms of that we needed on top of the grief of the sudden loss? No. If she had said clearly where she wanted to go, and for whatever reason she didn't, and there's no judgment around that, but she didn't, it would have made life a whole lot easier for us. And so the one question we struggled with was, did we do the right thing? We placed her with her husband in New York City, and the question was, did we do the right thing? That hung out for a little bit for us, but then after a little while, we decided, you know what, we did the best we could with what we had. So I really realized that the importance of, number one, knowing what your wishes are, and number two, sharing those with others so that they know what it is you want. And in addition, I do see end of life as a continuum of care, and it is important for us to plan for it. I see end of life as much a part of life as the beginning of life, as our birth. So I really am inviting people to start seeing it not as an abrupt break of life, but as a gentle glide into the next chapter. And of course, I am not an attorney, so please, this information tonight is for informational purposes and to get things started. But if there's any legal questions, absolutely, it's important to seek out an attorney. So, okay, let's move forward. So what is advanced care planning? And just checking and making sure everyone can still see my slides. You'll type in. What is advanced care planning? So advanced care planning is about making decisions about the care that you want to receive if you are unable to speak for yourself. That is in addition to the care that you want to receive and the care that you do not want to receive when you're unable to speak for yourself. And for me, this is more than just documents. The documents are called advance directives. So I see advanced care planning as kind of the umbrella. And advanced directives are the documents that we'll get to and talk about. I also frame advanced care planning like a roadmap. And I call that the 3 Ps: priorities, preferences, and the practical. So clearly the first 2 are very non-medical. And the third one, as we'll get into, there's parts of it that is medical and parts that are not medical. So, and advanced care planning allows one to live well now. Peace of mind, a quality of life, planning ahead. Thinking and planning, actually, they found studies that actually result in living healthier lives. Because now there's no more pretending or denying that we're going to die. You know, I had, let me come back on screen just for a moment here. I had a wonderful opportunity on Monday night to hear Stephen Jenkinson, who wrote the book Die Wise, and he's doing a world tour. You know, one of the things that he spoke about was the fact that people say that, you know, yeah, I know I'm going to die. You know, yeah, it's part of life. I know I'm going to die. But in fact, the reality is that the word know, K-N-O-W, means that we have a specific action. If we know something, we take action. But the culture here, especially North America, is we tend to avoid, deny, we don't want to deal, we don't want to face it. So in fact, when we say, I know I'm going to die, we really don't know that because our actions are not in sync with our behaviors are not in sync with our words. So I think it's really important that, you know, we take this opportunity, that we plan ahead and we really open the door again to the reality of what's going to happen to all of us. And I'm not saying it's easy by any means. And so that's why I support people in having these, number one, figuring what's important to them, and then having conversations with people so that they can then live fully now. They can have a quality of life now, and it's not hanging over their head. You know, imagine just for a moment, you know, that regardless of whatever age you are, you know, that you maybe were involved in a motor vehicle accident and you were now in a coma and you had not shared with anyone what was important to you about quality of life, what end of life care you want, where you want to be, what medical interventions you want and don't want. That would be a really difficult time for not only the doctors, but also your family and your loved ones. If you had nothing, if you had not had conversations, if you had not written down anything, if you had not completed healthcare proxies or living wills, and we'll get into what all those are later. So planning ahead not only helps you live a better quality of life now, but also helps your loved ones and really takes away some of the pieces around, you know, not having to have those questions like I did with my mother-in-law, like, are we doing the right thing? Is this what she would have wanted? People will know. So let me just take a moment here to check into the chat because I see people are typing in. So this is excellent. Let me scroll down here. All right. Gretchen, great. You do this work as well. Always interested in the perspective of the others doing the same work. As I do as well. So by no means am I an expert. This is the work that I found that's been helpful for people, but certainly there's plenty out there. So I welcome connection and collaboration with fellow colleagues. Chris says, I want to have a game plan for myself and some knowledge to make sure loved ones are taken care of too. Absolutely. So we're talking a lot about for us, but this is also a way to begin to open the door with conversations to our family members. You know, we'll talk a little bit about how to have those conversations. So it opens the door for them as well to then say, oh yeah, you know, maybe they've been thinking about it and didn't want to bring it up. But if you bring it up, you know, there may be another opportunity here. So great. Jacqueline says, what happened to my mother in Ireland? Do not want to keep reminding you about end of life. Yeah, yeah. Nothing was respected then in 2009. Yeah, we've come a little further, but not much. So there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening in the medical community, and there's a lot happening kind of in this end of life movement here to assist people in kind of figuring out and supporting them for what their wishes are. Jacqueline says, Quebec has just passed doctor-assisted end of life. Yes, I just saw that. And that's a whole nother webinar in itself in terms of physician assisted deaths in the courts now. Yeah, I'm sure it is, she says. Okay. Brittany says, I want specific advanced care details on planning and care of Alzheimer's and other type of long-term incapacitation. We may touch on that a little bit, but there's more specialized forms and things that my understanding is around Alzheimer's. I'm not familiar with them, that I don't use those with clients, but I know that there are some advanced directives now specifically for Alzheimer's. So that might be important to get into. All right. Let's see. Who says this here about removing any control? Great, great. All right, so let's get back to the slides now as we move forward. Okay, here we go. All right, so we just talked a little bit about what advanced care planning is and the importance of it. We move into now. Why is advanced care planning important? So, there were former generations. People lived in community, they lived in close proximity with each other, they knew each other's end of life wishes for the most part. Deaths were fairly common, people died at a young age, so there wasn't a whole lot of planning that went on. But now in our society where people are spread out, family members are, on the other side of the globe sometimes, there's just not that ability to be so close to one another. And so sometimes when something happens, you may get a phone call saying, something happened to a loved one, or they're in the hospital, or, they just were diagnosed with a life-limiting illness or whatever. So being able to be in touch, yes, we have social media, yes, we have the internet, but it's quite different than kind of the way it used to be with communities just being, or families just being in close proximity and living all in community together. So now more than ever, it's important that people know what our wishes are, especially if they need to be navigating that from a distance. Another reason that advanced care planning is important is because of the medical advances that have been happening now in our world. And the big question becomes, when is enough enough? Having advanced care planning and wishes and plans in place really helps prevent any futile procedures or medications or things that we would not want. Because, as I said, the question now becomes, when is enough enough? And we are relying so heavily on the medical profession. In some ways, we've turned our power over to them, seeing the doctor as the expert instead of as a co-creative partner. And so a lot of times we've abdicated our responsibility for what it is that we want to the medical community. How often do we go and we see them as, whatever the doctor says? Well, we are actually the expert in our own life. Yes, they have medical knowledge. However, I think in partnership, whereas that partnership has been lost. So I think that's important to kind of bring that back. Advanced care planning is also important, again, because it will help to alleviate any confusion or guilt, as I've talked about. It's a gift to yourself and to your family. It lessens the stress at a very stressful time, and any guessing. Trying to make decisions under duress is actually not the best way to do it. And so not waiting for a medical crisis to be able to make these plans. I heard someone the other day say, one of the webinars I was listening to, saying everyone over the age of 18, or when they turn 18, should put advanced care planning in place, because, don't wait for that medical crisis. Don't wait for creeping age calling your name. And again, any doubt or confusion by the doctors equals they do everything. They are trained, this is their profession, they are trained that if in doubt, they will pull out all the stops. They will do CPR on a 95-year-old, very thin woman with her ribs and bones sticking out if she says she does not want to be resuscitated. If she wants to be resuscitated, they will do CPR. Now, the CPR, probably the bones breaking will puncture her heart. However, that is legally their role and responsibility as physicians. So if there's any doubt or confusion, the doctors will do everything. So I think it's important, again, for us to be able to say what it is that we want. Here's a quick few statistics for you. So a lot of the common responses when I talk to people about advanced care planning is, it's too soon, or I'm too healthy, or I'm too young. The woman that started, her name escapes me right now, the Conversation Project, said, It's only too soon when it's too late. So having, these as excuses, again, as I just said, someone said that everyone over the age of 18 should have it, have advanced care planning and advanced directives. You just never know. Tomorrow is not promised to any of us. And the assumptive world that we live in, where we assume that babies will grow up, we assume that people will retire and then have, end their work and then have a great retirement. We assume that parents will die before their children. But in fact, the reality is that that doesn't always happen. So being able to counteract those, it's too soon, I'm too healthy, I'm too young with, tomorrow really isn't promised. And promised in terms of us being here, or even promised that we're going to be fully functioning and healthy. It's not always about dying. It's just even about being incapacitated. So 9 out of 10 people say they do not want to die in the hospital or in assisted living. But the reality is 50% do. 80% of people get aggressive care at the end of their life. I just heard recently that 80 cents of every dollar is spent on aggressive care in the last 5 days of life in a hospital. 80 cents of every dollar for aggressive care. And then 82% of people say it's important to put their wishes in writing, but only 23% have. So less than 1/4 have actually put something in writing to others. One other statistic that I didn't put on here was 90% say talking to a loved one about their end of life wishes is important to them, but only 27% of people have done so. So that's a really, it goes back to one of the comments earlier. I think Chris said it about being able to have those conversations with our loved ones, that in addition to us sharing with them, but also engaging them in having those conversations, because they probably are part of that 90% that feel that it is important to have conversations, and for whatever reason they're not. So let's see here. On to the next slide about why don't we plan? If we say we want to, if we say it's important, if we say we don't want aggressive care, then why don't we plan? One of the number one reasons is because of our fear of our own mortality. There's an avoidance that doesn't seem to work anymore. However, more and more we're being faced with emotional pain and emotional suffering. And so the second leading fear in the United States is fear of our own mortality. The number one fear is actually public speaking, surprisingly, but the second leading fear in the United States is fear of our own mortality. It's the ultimate unknown, right? I mean, no one has come back after any length of time for wherever they go, wherever they go after the physical body dies, and come back and said, hey, wow, it's great here, or it's not great here, or whatever. No one's come back, so we don't know. It's the great unknown. And we have no control about that. Why we don't plan also, again, is we've given over our end-of-life care and dying to our medical provider, as I mentioned earlier. There's now some incentives, or at least there's one that's starting in January with Medicare reimbursing physicians. We're not sure how that's all going to look yet, but Medicare reimbursing physicians to be having these conversations with their patients, or at least starting their conversations. So hopefully, again, there'll be that partnership that I talked about between the medical provider and ourselves. Another reason why we don't plan, we live, especially here in the United States, in a culture of beauty and youth and immortality. So death and dying and aging doesn't have a place in that culture. So there's no reason why, there's no encouragement, I should say, for us to really think about planning for our future, planning for that last chapter. And the other reason why many times we don't plan is we just don't know where to start. We just don't know where to start. Okay, let me just take a moment here and check into the chat. And I have a question for you. what do people really want? What do you really want at the end of your life? And then we'll get to that slide in a minute. So let me come back on screen here, and oh wow, the chat is just humming here. This is excellent. Okay. Jacqueline's talking about DNRs, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. And congratulations, 101st year for your mom. Wow. Okay. Let's see as I scroll up here. All right, Elaine says, my husband is 84, 10 years older than I am. He's healthy and strong, but his answers is always surprise me. Yeah, Elaine, you know, that is, maybe he, you know, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of I haven't heard surprise me, but I've heard kind of, yeah, do what you will. You know what I want. You know me well enough. I've heard lots of those types of comments. However, I think that, you know, it's important that maybe after this, you can just say to him, you know what, if he can even just verbalize it to you. You know, I tell people, someone asked me once, is it okay to write my wishes on a napkin? I said, a napkin is better than nothing. You know, if you can at least get him to say something. You know, it may not be the full-blown, you know, documents that are legally binding. However, it's something, and at least you'll have a sense that you knew that he expressed what it is that he wants. So, yeah. Okay, so continue to type on into the chat here. This is excellent. We're going to kind of move on to what it is that people really want. You know, we talked about what we don't want at the end of life and why we don't plan. And so what is it that we want at the end of life? Great. Chris says, I want to be at peace and simple for my family. Simple. Chris, type in a little bit more. What do you mean by that? I want to be at peace and simple for my family. Do you mean you want to have things go smoothly for them? Type that in. Yes. Do you offer a form to get started with advanced planning? Yes, Brittany. We'll talk about a few of those in just a little bit. Are verbal wishes accepted in the United States? Jacqueline, you know, verbal wishes are better than nothing. And as we'll talk about, our healthcare proxy, and that's the person that will speak for us when we're unable, if you've even verbally spoken to them about what it is, that's a legal, you know, they're a legal representation for you. So absolutely, verbal wishes would be fine. Chris just clarified, I have it all mapped out. Great. Oh, okay, so you've taken care of things for them. Excellent. Great, great. Okay, so let's get back to the slides here and let's see what it is that people really want. Probably what we all want. Okay. All right, here we go. So, what people really want at the end of their life, or when they're in a medical crisis and life-limiting illness, some control over their end-of-life care. Some say about what happens to them and how that might happen. So a lot of times we're talking here about medical. Also, we'll get into that there's some non-medical things that people want control over at the end of their life. People also want to be well informed of their options. You know, I think really a push comes to shove, we all really want to have honest, open conversations. We want to know what our options are. We want to kind of know what's going on here and be well informed of whatever is happening to us, what are our options, and have them laid out on the table. What people really want is also not to be a burden to our caregivers. And as Chris said, you know, to have things mapped out, to have things in place. And we'll talk about what some of those are. We all want to be free of pain and suffering. I would venture to guess that we all can agree on that one, that we want to be free from pain and suffering. And again, being able to share what it is that's important to us and our quality of life in that last chapter, and medical interventions that we want and don't want, to be free of pain and suffering are important. Because again, as I said, when in doubt, doctors will do everything. And it may not be what we want. And it may not be the most pain-free options. And it may not cause us to not suffer. In fact, I was just watching The Doctors, the TV show, and there was a ER physician, Dr. Monica Murphy, who was saying that, she's an emergency room doctor. She said, you don't want to see us. You don't want to come into the emergency room, at the end of life, because it's not about relieving suffering. The interventions that we need to do usually cause more suffering. So if we can note down what it is that we want and share that, we can begin to hopefully alleviate some of that. And I think that one of the things that we all want is to die in peace. So clearly there's a space between why we don't plan and what we really want. And I see that as an invitation for us to really begin to look at advanced care planning, to begin to have the conversation with ourselves and also with our loved ones. So let's begin that right here, right now. So here we are jumping into now the first P in what I call the 3 Ps, and that is priorities. So priorities, what is important to you? What matters to you? What gives you meaning? What gives your life meaning? So this really revolves around values and beliefs and any fears you might have. It goes to questions such as, before I die, I blank. What is it that's your biggest hope and dream and your goal? So this is a non-medical intervention, or maybe the intervention is not the right word. This is a non-medical way to begin to craft what it is that's important to you. To begin to craft what are those pieces that you want at the end of your life. And we can't fill out forms and documents and check boxes if we don't even know what our priorities are, if we don't even know what's important to us, what our values are. Working from this starting point then will inform us into some of those questions later on, especially in the medical questions about what you want, what you don't want, because it'll be a lot easier when they're in alignment with your values, or if they're clearly not in alignment with your values and your beliefs. So I think that's an important piece here as we begin the conversation to think about some of these priorities. And I should have started by saying one of the bullet points on this slide is, it is not a one and done conversation. This is a starting point here, and there is something that I just ran across the other day, which I thought is great. The 5 Ds, the 5 Ds as in the 5D as in David, in terms of having these conversations and in revisiting, beginning with priorities and moving on to the other 2 Ps. And as we said, advanced care planning is an ongoing process. It's not a one and done conversation. And so really helping us to review and renew our wishes when any of these 5 Ds occur. Number 1, when you reach a new decade in your age, great time to review again what it is that you've put in place at the beginning of each new decade. Number 2, when you experience the death of a loved one, great time to pull out your stuff and to kind of make sure that what's happened and what's important to you is still important now. Because time passes. You can rest assured that when my mother-in-law died in 1994, we pulled out and revised and reviewed healthcare proxies, living wills, wills and trusts, all those documents, and got all that back in order again. So, again, we're looking at 24 years ago. So again, through the years, I've pulled those out and we've looked at those just to make sure that it still says what we want it to say. So the second one is when you experience a death of a loved one. The third D is if you divorce. I guess that does stand to reason because maybe some of your documents listed maybe now your ex-spouse, And you may or may not want to have that person still as maybe your healthcare proxy or in your will in various parts. So again, I think it's important for major life events like that to check out what you have and to see if that's still relevant. The fourth D is if you're given a diagnosis of any type of life-limiting illness. So now you've moved from, quote, being healthy, if you did these while you were healthy, to now you have a life-limiting illness. You have a diagnosis. And that may change things considerably for you, depending on what that is. So again, priorities may change. What's important to you now may change. Your values may change. So being able to, again, look at your healthcare, your advanced directives, and to see what may be changed, what needs to be changed, and what needs to stay the same. And then the fifth D in the 5 Ds is if you suffer a decline in your medical condition. So again, there may be priorities in what's important to you and what matters to you and what you want. The beginning of your diagnosis, when you first get a terminal diagnosis, but as you begin to decline, that may shift your priorities. That may shift things that are important to you. So being able to look at those, and the 5 Ds I think is great. So again, it's these priorities, there's more questions, about what gives you pleasure, and what's important to you, what matters to you now. And really it's about encouraging you to think about and to really begin to sit with, meditate if that's, something that is important to you, and really begin to kind of see let me ask that question of myself. What matters? A lot of times those are questions we never even asked ourselves. Maybe sharing that with a friend, or being able to have that dialogue. So beginning that conversation, I think, is really important, and it starts with what matters to you and what are your priorities. Okay, and so from there, now we move into personal preferences and wishes. So again, another non-medical part here that we're moving into, but still very, very important. Things that we want and we don't want. Based on your priorities, based on your values and your beliefs, what are some of your personal preferences now and your wishes? Again, we have not gotten to any documents yet. We're still exploring and discovering what's important to you. And so the two big areas that I tend to focus on, obviously, are, end-of-life care and then after-death care, which a lot of times we tend to forget about. We thought, well, someone else will deal with it after we die. Well, in some ways, we can also share what our preferences and wishes are for that. Let me just take a little sip of tea here, and I'll get right back to you. Okay, so around end-of-life care. So what's important a lot of times is, what's the location? Where, if we are ill, where do we want to be? Do we want to be in the home? Do we want to be in the hospital? Do we want to be in a hospice home? Do we want to be in an assisted living? Where do we want to be? Do we want to be in the emergency room and then be in ICU? What is our location? Where do we want to be? And what are those surroundings that we want to have? Do we want to have it be a medical surrounding? Do you want to have it be more serene and be at home, surrounded by, being a beautiful room with being able to look out on a garden? I mean, depending, of course, where you live. But, these are important questions that we need to ask ourselves about where we want this end-of-life care to take place. And then in addition, what type of care do we want? Do we want aggressive care, kind of do everything? Do we want comfort care? Do we want hospice? Do we want in-home hospice? Which, is similar care to a hospice home, which is a physical freestanding building, which usually it's, 6 or 7 rooms with beautiful surroundings and the ability to have, hospice providers, the interdisciplinary team come into that hospice home, which is the same as what you can have coming into your own home. Is there spiritual or religious support that's important to you, that for your wishes? Are clergy members important? Is there a spiritual part in terms of, burning incense or having nature around, which gets into a little bit into the last part of end of life care there is, is there music? Is there scents that you like, smells? Do you want people around? Do you not want people around? If you're an introvert most of your life, is it going to be okay with you to have people in and out, maybe to your home, visiting you? Or maybe it'll be important for you to say, you know what, I really only need people between this time and this time, because you need time to maintain your own energy, or to maybe recharge your own energy. If you're an extrovert, maybe a party celebration or party atmosphere is something more that you want. And I'm just being very general here in terms of introvert, extrovert. But again, do you want your pets around? So again, these are important preferences and personal wishes that are also important to have recorded, written down, so that people know what it is that you want, especially if you're not able to verbalize that. In aftercare, it's important we think about funerals. Do you want a home funeral, or do you want a traditional funeral at a funeral home? Do you want to be buried? Might that be a green burial or a traditional burial? Is cremation something that you're interested in? Do you want a service? Do you not want a service? Do you want to write your own obituary? What music would you like played at a service? Do you have favorite readings picked out? These are all questions that, are important for you to consider, again, because then you get to plan what it is that you want. How many of us have ever been to a funeral or a wake or a memorial service for someone, and you just feel the energy there, that that this is so not representative of the person that you knew them to be, right? Because either someone else is trying to guess and figure it out or do it the way they want, but it's so not who the person was or how they would want it. So just, again, imagine if this were you. You certainly would want to have some say in over that. So, okay. Before we get into the third P, let me just jump back here to the chat and see what's going on here. Wow, we have lots of great questions. Yeah, and these are questions, Jacqueline, you're asking some fantastic questions. Technology, let's see. Most of us would want to die in our home. There are a good many that do, and then there are a good many that want to be in the hospital. Again, it's no judgment about right or wrong or good or bad. It's about your choice, right? And so not just being thrown into a hospital if you would rather be in the hospital or at home. So green burial, yeah, we can get into that a little bit. That's where you are not put into a vault in the ground. It's either a biodegradable casket or a shroud. And green burials are popping up. They're more ecologically friendly. And we can talk about more of that. Probably not tonight, but absolutely feel free to pop me an email. We can talk more about that. Jacqueline's noticing more obituaries in the local paper are saying cremation, no funeral. Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a movement toward that. So again, it's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It's about what people's preferences are. So, all right, let me jump back here and share my screen once again with you as we move into the third P, which is, here we go. Come on. Okay, it's just taking a second here to load. Sorry about this, guys. Here we go. Okay, so personal preferences. Now we move into some of the practical. And the practical is some of these advanced care directives. And there's some that are legal documents. And this is really skimming the surface tonight, guys. We're not going to dig too deeply because there'll be an opportunity to do that with me. And also, I'm happy to do another webinar and dive a little deeper in some of these areas. But this is just really kind of an overview tonight. So one of the first practical is advanced care directives. And so the two legal documents for the most part are a healthcare proxy, which is also called a durable power of attorney, and a living will. So the healthcare proxy is actually the individual that you have designated to speak for you in terms of medical treatments that you do and do not want at the end of your life when you are unable to. And so here's the thing with this. It's important that you choose someone that, number one, will be able to carry out your wishes. And number two, what's equally as important is that you let that person know ahead of time that you have designated them and want them to be your healthcare proxy. Because I've seen over and over again that people are shocked and surprised when all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm the healthcare proxy? Ooh, I'm not sure I could, agree to have a green burial, or I'm not sure that, whatever your wishes might be, they may not share the same values. So it's important that you have that conversation with them. The other, so that if you have nothing else, this is a takeaway for tonight. If you have nothing else in place, please get a healthcare proxy, which is also called the durable power of attorney. Someone that knows what you would like to have happen when you are unable to do so, when you're incapacitated, unable to do so. Now, a living will is also a medical document or a legal document. It's not legal in every state. Like, for example, I'm here in Massachusetts, and we don't have a standard living will form. They will honor many of them that are out there, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But a living will really is the roadmap, so to speak, about the medical treatments that you want. We often think about these, you check the box, yes, I want a respirator. No, I don't want a feeding tube. Yes, start antibiotics, but stop them if, they're doing nothing. It's those types of things. That's the living will. Then we have some medical orders, a POLST, which is a physician order for life-sustaining treatment, or a medical order for life-sustaining treatment. It's called different things in different states, but it's not necessarily considered an advanced directive because it is a medical order and it's signed by both you and your doctor. Now, it is effective as soon as it's signed. So again, we encourage that it's not for everyone. It's for folks that, are a little bit, elderly, as well as folks that have a life-limiting illness. So again, it just lists your wishes very clearly, and it's a medical order in your medical chart. So it feels stronger than a living will. A DNR or an ALD. So a DNR is a do not resuscitate, and an AND is allow natural death. And then, of course, we have a financial power of attorney, and then wills and trusts. So again, these lump all together. The financial power of attorney and wills and trusts certainly seek out an attorney for those. This is also the time, as we're filling out these forms, to have these conversations and share with family and loved ones and friends. A couple of ways to start that conversation. I just answered some questions about how I want to end my life, how I want the end of my life to be. I would love for you to see my answers, and I'm wondering what your answers might be. So there's an opportunity to share with someone, as Chris, I think in the beginning mentioned, being able to have those conversations with others to engage them of, here's what I've done. I'd love to share it with you, and I'd love to hear what your answers might be. And that could open the door again to be able to have them do some of these things. So, it's there is no perfect time to have these conversations. There is no need to reinvent the wheel because there's plenty of things out there. It's about patience, and it's about being able to be prepared so that, again, if something were to happen to you and you're unable to speak for yourself about what your wishes are, then you have, number one, a healthcare proxy who can share those wishes, and number two, things written down so that your wishes could be known. Here's some practical resources for you. That there's a lot on the internet. And so I think that what I've done is I've collected some of these things around being able to consolidate some things, because it can be very overwhelming. One of the reasons people don't start is because they don't know where to. You Google end of life, you Google advanced care planning, you Google all that stuff, and you come up with thousands of things. So Begin the Conversation is one beautiful organization. And again, it's about beginning the conversation. So you can see the website address there. The Conversation Project with Ellen Goodman. She's the name I couldn't remember earlier, who said, it's only too soon when it's too late. The conversationproject.org has excellent information. 5 Wishes document, which is a relatively popular thing around documenting what your wishes are. 3 of those have to do with non-medical, again, talking about priorities and preferences. And then the last 2 wishes have to do with more medical, part of the living will. So check those out at agingwithdignity.org. My Gift of Grace is a game, and I'll come back on screen in a minute and show you that. My Gift of Grace is a game with a deck of, I just got it the other day, but I think there's about 49 cards that have questions on them. So again, it's another opportunity to open the door and begin the conversation. There's some online options, Ever Plans, where you can type in, especially for today with things being online, and Cake, which it's joincake.com, and it's supposed to be, being able to write your wishes online again. It's supposed to be easy as cake, simple as cake. So that was, I think I'm just going to complete here, and then I'll show you some of the things that I have here in terms of the practical tools. So just a couple myths, just quickly. One of the myths is advanced directives are only for older people. And I hope that you see, as we've gone through tonight, that actually, in fact, they're not. Anything could happen at any time. And younger adults actually have more at stake, because if they're stricken with a medical disease or an accident, the technology is so advanced today to keep them alive in a vegetative state that they may or may not want to be in. So advanced directives and advanced care planning are not only for older people. If I appoint a healthcare proxy, I give up the right to make my own decisions. Absolutely not. Healthcare proxy only kicks in when you are unable to, when you are incapacitated, when you're in a coma, when you are not able to do it. So as long as you have the sound mind, even after delegating a healthcare proxy, it is your decision and your voice that's heard in making any of your decisions. And then thirdly, a myth that an advanced directive means do not treat. And actually, advanced directives are meant to express not only what you do not want, but what you positively do want. So advanced directives, if we can think of them not as, oh, I don't want something, an advanced directive is also about what's important of what we do want. So, all right. So let me just come back on screen here for just one moment. Okay. Great. Jacqueline says she saw, My Gift of Grace. Let me show you guys. So here it is. Can you see this? My Gift of Grace. It's a conversation game for living and dying well. And what it is actually, it's a series of questions. And it's meant to really encourage people. It's a series of questions. I can pull these out here. For example, one of the questions is, if you could pick anyone to sing at your memorial service, who would it be and what would they sing? So it's questions like that, again, it's another avenue, another opportunity to open the door to having these conversations, so to speak. Let me just show you one piece here, the What If workbook, which I think was the last resource that I didn't mention. This is a workbook that's all in one. A colleague of mine, Gwen Morgan, created this, and it literally is an opportunity for you to just fill in the blanks. Fill in the blanks about personal information, financial information, end of life information, in one place that you then have. And so then you are able to have this available. Someone could go to this and just flip to it about what's important. You know, we didn't even touch on passwords and financial institution information and all those things that are important when, if someone dies, that you need to access. So again, this is just another resource. So this has been wonderful. Let me just share with you quickly what I have. I mentioned in the beginning an opportunity to kind of just to be able to do some further work. But there's an option to go a little deeper here with me to be able to actually begin this process. So on Monday, December 14th, from 8 p.m. to 9:15 p.m., I'm actually going to do a webinar, and I can have up to 9 people on it. And for an opportunity for you to, if you're ready to say, yep, I want to begin this conversation, I want to be able to begin to put things in place and make a plan and have that roadmap and that plan. If you go to www.griefandlosscoach.com/ACP for Advanced Care Planning, you will find a form there with information where I'll be, like I said, running this webinar series for 75 minutes for an investment of $57 of a gift I see at the holidays here for yourself and for your loved ones. So again, if you're feeling like, wow, this is great information, I'm ready to go, fantastic. If you're feeling like, you know what, I just kind of want a little bit more, we're going to get into some values. I'm going to send information to any of those that are interested in joining us. If more than 9 people are interested, you know, I'll be able to, because we can only have 9 people on the webinar here, I'll be able to offer it again on Tuesday, December 15th. So, you know, there's a couple of options there again, but go to yourgriefandlosscoach.com/ACP, and I'll come back on screen here now and also put that into the chat. And if you are interested, love to have you join and really be able to support anyone that's interested to be able to kind of move forward with, you know, having these conversations, beginning to look at your preferences, your priorities, and then we move into the practical. So let me just, whoops, that was not good. Let me get back here and I'm going to type this in here. So it's www.yourgriefandlosscoach. Oops, I could spell. Kind of hard doing double duty tonight. .com/advanced care ACP. So if any of you are interested in that, you know, feel free. Again, it's been my pleasure tonight to kind of share this information with you. Hopefully you've taken away, you know, a few things here in terms of next steps for yourself. And Jacqueline asked a great, why only 9 people, Kim? Because we're going to do this as a live webinar and I can only have 9 people plus me, 10 maximum on the screen. So that's why we can only have 9. I'm trying this new format here because it allows me to have people from around the world join us as opposed to in my local community where I usually just do it with you know, in person. So that's the reason for only 9 people. So again, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to have you all here tonight with me. Want to announce one more little thing for those of you that are on Twitter. So my friend Michael Bloom, who is also a caregiver coach, and you might remember he was last month's webinar guest around caregiving. He and I have teamed up. Some of you may have heard of Blab, B-L-A-B. It's a new online, let me read it here. It's a new online thing through Twitter, live streaming. And so he and I are actually doing a Blab next week. What are we titling it here? Yeah, great. It is about wishing, the holidays. So about being able to get support and encouragement around the holidays. So our Blab link is dyingtotalkcafe.net. And so really, if you're a Twitter user, go to dyingtotalkcafe.net and it'll ask you to subscribe. There's no registration or anything. It's a similar type of opportunity for people to be interactive on a webinar, but it's not a registration or anything like what I'm using tonight. So if you're on Twitter, go for it. Michael, thank you. You see, I kind of flubbed up a little bit, but yes, we're going to be blabbing together. So that would be excellent. Let me type that in here as well. So it's our Dying to Talk Cafe, Dying to Talk cafe.net. And if you've Twitter users, you go there, you will be taken right there to subscribe. So again, thank you everyone. Happy holidays to everyone, whatever tradition you celebrate. And I look forward to seeing you and having you join us again in 2016. So warm wishes for a wonderful holiday and a wonderful start of 2016, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Thanks again, everyone. Certainly feel free, email me at kim@yourgriefandlosscoach. Maybe I'll see some of you on Monday evening, the 14th, as we dive a little deeper into this and get personal. And again, thank you so much for your patience tonight as I was running solo and trying to run the screen share for the slides, but hopefully everything went really well. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great night, and we will see you in 2016. Take care. Bye-bye.